engines are stereotypically unreliable, right? So you're thinking, man, a K-swap and an FD just kind of makes sense. It's got that Japanese spirit, similar power band, and it's lighter, but it would be so much cheaper. K-series engines only cost like $500, right? Well, not exactly.
I've held off on making this video because I'm hesitant to share how much it costs to K-swap my FD. It's not as simple as going online and buying the parts. It's not like K-swapping a Civic. A lot of these parts aren't available online, which means a lot of the cost associated with this build is labor and fabrication. Naturally, these costs are going to go down over time as companies make K-swap components. But I've had enough people asking me about how much the swap costs that I figure it's worth making a video about. Other than the initial purchase price of the car, I'm going to list out all of these prices at the MSRP value. Because used car parts prices can vary from day to day, it's kind of hard to gauge how much they're worth. So I'm going to keep it simple and leave it at the MSRP value. Just keep in mind that you might be able to find these parts a little bit cheaper online. As for the labor, I'm going to leave that towards the end of this video. Because I feel like a lot of you watching this are going to attempt to do this swap yourselves. I'll leave that towards last. But I will say, I would pay the labor on this any day of the week. It's not that I'm incapable of doing this work myself, you can see that in some of our build videos. But Andy has a lot more to offer than just turning wrenches. He's done K-swaps to hundreds of vehicles, which means that's going to save me a lot in potential mistakes and having to rebuy some of these parts. And also, it's going to save me a lot of time in my own labor cost. So I'd pay that labor any day of the week.
My first purchase was the rolling shell itself. I found it on a Facebook group, and the car was located in Alabama. I paid $16,000 for the rolling shell. It came with a K20 Z1 engine, mated to an AP1 S2000 transmission. It had an exhaust manifold, Borg-Warner turbo, fabricated subframe, transmission bracing, intercooler, and all the intercooler piping. I got the car home and wanted to clean up the body of the car before starting on the swap. I spent $675 on paintless dent removal. I then took the car to Wisconsin to have the K-swap expert Andy Smedegard tear it down. We noticed the oil pan was cracked, so I put on a baffled Unit 2 oil pan. We put the engine back together with some powder-coated parts, a dampened crank pulley, and brand new accessories. I went with a stock OEM clutch and ACT pressure plate. Now we move on to the fuel system. I put in a Walboro 255 fuel pump with a fuel tank baffle. We used a Radium Engineering fuel rail and Injector Dynamics 1050cc injectors, all flowing through an AEM ethanol sensor. We used an intake manifold coolant adapter and some OEM belt tensioners and brackets. Now we move on to some more expensive items. The nervous system. I went with a race-grade engine harness from K-Tuned, converted to fit an AEM Infinity ECU with AEM's flying lead harness, and hooked up a boost controller, oil pressure sensor, Dakota Digital Speedo interface, AEM wideband, and gauge arc gauge. We also put in electric power steering from a 2012 Volvo C30. This required a pump, wiring harness, and a bigger battery.
And that's most of the work to the engine. It's not too bad, honestly. It seems kind of reasonable. It's about the price of an S2000. But we're not even close to done yet. That's just the engine. Now it's time to move on to the drivetrain.
We had a custom drive shaft made by Full Torque to connect the S2000 transmission to the FD rear end. Then we had to replace the rear axles, rotors, and pads. Before we set the car down on the ground, we got some really nice Fortunato 510 coilovers with all of the options. These coilovers were great, honestly, I can't recommend them enough. They're so comfortable, but aggressive. I could have left the stock wheels, but I needed new tires anyway, so I got some Titan 7 R10 wheels and wrapped them with some winter tires to prepare for our winter road trip.
Now let's get to some of the cosmetic changes to this car. Now obviously you don't need to do these things if you want to K-swap an FD, but if you have an FD, you're probably not going to want to leave it stock with mismatched fender and paint blemishes. So let's get to making some of these exterior changes, starting with the front bumper and wide body fenders.
I got this fiberglass body kit from a company that I won't name because I'm not very happy with the build quality of it and I can't recommend it to others. It's a replica kit of the burnout style front bumper with feed wide body fenders. I paid $1,000 too much for these. I had to replace the headlight covers with some OEM covers and OEM style turn signals. I put in a very cheap Amazon radio and some nice Garage Alpha floor mats. Then I went to Illusions Wraps to get it all wrapped in one color. I went with a really nice Dragonfire red from 3M. I also got a bunch of carbon fiber parts because I'm secretly a hot boy. These actually turned out pretty well. I got an REM EMEA style rear diffuser with the feed style side skirts. I topped these off with a genuine REM EMEA GT3 low mount rear spoiler. I then went to Professional Awesome to put on a budget front splitter just to protect the brittle fiberglass bumper from any curbs.
Now that brings us to the 48-state road trip. In road trip form, we're at about $40,000, but that also doesn't include labor. If I include Andy, Irv, and Artsem's labor, we're at $61,912. Now, obviously it'd be pretty easy to justify removing that labor cost, but let's be realistic. If I didn't pay Andy to do the work on this car, it would have probably taken me months longer to complete. I'd have tons of reliability issues once I got it running, and I probably would have broken a lot of stuff along the way. I can honestly say that I think Andy's labor is the best bargain of the whole thing.
So by the time we were on the road trip, I was rolling around in what cost $61,912. It's starting to look like K-swapping isn't a smart option, especially when a stock rotary RX7 cost in the 30s. I didn't do the K-swap because I thought it would be cost effective though. I did it for the reliability, longevity, and ease of making horsepower, which I think was successful.
Oh my God! How much boost is that thing making?
This car is making 400 wheel horsepower. I did, however, have a few reliability hiccups on the road trip. I had to replace the brake lines with some Chase-based stainless steel braided lines. The previous owner's intercooler pipe also cracked on me, and this cost $250 to fix. Also, after the road trip, I bought another FD to swap in black interior. This saved me some money because I found a good deal. But full used black interiors for FDs generally cost about $5,000. I also put in new door handles and some upgraded interior clips and trim. In the passenger footwell, I put in a Garage Alpha Spirit R aluminum footrest. Lastly, I put in 99 spec taillights. Mine came in a little well used, so I'll discount the MSRP price.
$69,019. I've said it before, but modifying cars doesn't make sense. There's a lot of other amazing cars you can buy for $69,000. But this is a hobby, and hobbies are expensive. And I also have this YouTube channel to recoup some of the money. Would I do it again if I had the chance? Probably. While the cost of the whole car is pretty expensive, the maintenance cost is where you might start to save. I've had extremely minimal maintenance on this car over the 15,000 miles that I've driven it so far. I've only had $609 in repairs on the road trip, and I had a $65 window switch fail on me. That's not too bad. If I were to have the motor fail, I could drop another one in for only $800. There might eventually be a break-even point in the cost of this swap over keeping it rotary, but that's not what I did it for. I did it for the worry-free driving and for the fun of it. And so far, it's definitely paid off. Now, full disclosure, I didn't pay $69,019 for this car. After all the sponsorships and used car part prices, I paid $46,713. And that's why it's hard to make a video like this, because the prices can vary quite drastically just from day to day. But, you know, you could probably expect to pay about $50,000 to $60,000 for a car like this. Either way, hope you enjoyed watching this video. Subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.